Rope soloing can be one of the most fun and rewarding ways to climb. But if you don't have your systems dialed, it can be frustrating and downright scary. After trying out a lot of different techniques over a lot of different climbs, I've finally settled on the one that I'm about to show you in this video. The basics of the technique I use involve a self-feeding gree-gree, carrying the rope in a lightweight backpack, and using pre-tied backup knots. Okay, so you want to tie off the end of the rope. This is going to be the end that you come to at the top of a pitch. So I'm just going to do a figure 8 in that. Shove that into the bag, and it's easiest if you clip it onto something up above you and then feed it into the bag. 3, 4. And you can change the distance of the backup knots. I normally count about 10 half meters, which gives me about 5 meters, and tie a simple slip knot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so you just twist it up, grab the bottom piece, tuck it through, and pull. So when I've finished putting it into the bag, basically this is going to be the end that you're going to clip in first. So into that, again tie another figure 8 knot with a stopper knot on it. Just leave that hanging out for now. Now the bag that I'm using, it's just a Cedar Summit bag, standard backpack, very lightweight with a few modifications. So inside the backpack I actually have a bit of tubing running around that I've just taped in there just to keep it open so it's not going to get caught up with this, because the rope's going to feed out of this pack. The other thing I've done is just created some tabs, although you can use just tape for that. I'll show you what that's for in a minute. And this is going to be, instead of a chest harness, I've made another tab, but you can actually wear a chest harness if you prefer that. Okay, so the other pieces of equipment that we're going to use obviously is a harness. Now attached to that I'm using a steel beaner here. Okay, and the reason for that is because if you do happen to cross load it, then it's not going to break, but I've got some other things in mind to stop it cross loading. And some of this is just for convenience. At the base of the beaner, I actually tape on a piece of Velcro, which I then wrap around the bottom part of my harness, and that stops the beaner sliding up and down and twisting around different angles. Okay, now on the beaner, I actually have a rubber stopper, and I'll show you what that's for in a second. And that's just cut out of a hard piece of rubber, just so it slides onto the beaner there. Now the most important piece of equipment here, probably besides the rope, is a Petzl gree-gree. Now many people actually modify the gree-gree by cutting it off at the base here, and that's useful if you're actually hanging the rope below you and dragging that up. But I actually have it in a pack and it doesn't require that modification, which is always a good thing. And the only mod I've done to the gree-gree is to actually put a small loop on the back of it, which I've drilled a little hole and glued on. But there's other ways to do it. You can glue a tab on, or you can actually put a small piece of strong thread around the axle. And the reason for that is because you want to hold the gree-gree vertically, and in holding it vertically it'll actually self-feed. Okay, so the gree-gree, the rope goes through the gree-gree, make sure it's in the right direction because it's a little bit upside down. Okay, and then clip the gree-gree on, and now as you can see that can flop around, and that's not something you want to have happen, because if it flops around or if the beaner twists, then it's easier for it to cross load. And what you notice is sometimes you go to stand up if you're bending over and it'll actually dog you. So what I have is another rubber stopper that I then clip onto the beaner with the gree-gree on it, and that holds it all in a vertical position, so there's no flopping around. Okay, now the rope This is the lead end of the rope, and that's going to clip onto the anchors. This rope here is going to feed over my shoulder through a beaner I've got here. Okay, and at some point you're going to come to a knot in the rope. Now these are backup knots, so this here will lock against this beaner. It's not a rated beaner at all, and it doesn't need to be. It's designed to stop against the gree-gree in the worst case scenario. Now, to pop that out, the reason I don't do clove hitches or overhands is because these are much easier to pop out single-handedly. Okay, so you simply grab this, pop it out with one hand like that and your teeth, and you just feed it into your case loop.
The case loop is the rope that feeds directly into the gree-gree as you move and allows the gree-gree to self-feed. A smaller case loop will feed more easily. A larger case loop, because of the weight, is more likely to lock the gree-gree. On a more slippery, thinner rope, you can have a larger case loop. On a thicker rope, you need to have a smaller case loop.
Now the gree-gree, to hold it in position, have another knot for climbing beaner. And I use those because they're much lighter, with a piece of, in this case, elasticized strap, and it's adjustable through this little clip, this toggle here, because if you're on ground that's not very steep, you actually lean forward a lot more and it'll be a lot looser. So you can pull it in a bit tighter. If you're going up steep, you don't want it tight, so you can loosen it.
This was actually the first time I used an elasticized strap. From now on, I'm just going to go back to the standard 20 or 25 mil webbing.
Okay, so I've just free soloed the first couple of bolts on this one because it's quite easy. But I've already got my system set up here such that all I need to do when I get to the bolt is clip that on. So now I'm leading on that gree-gree. The rope's hanging down past me probably for about 3-4 meters, it depends on the rope, and that will allow it to self-feed as I move, so I don't have to feed it through the gree-gree. And you want to keep trying to feed that rope so you've got a little bit of slack there. And then eventually a knot will come through here which I have to pop out. So as you can see, this beaner can flop around every which way, get caught on the nut there, which is not what you want. So what I'm going to do, firstly, I'm going to clip my gear that I'm not going to take up with me when I'm leading onto the bolt.
Just a note here, do not clip anything to your anchor beaner. If you don't have a second bolt, or you can't comfortably clip two beaners to the one hanger, then you can thread a thin sling directly through the hanger and clip your gear to that.
Okay, and I'm going to make sure that's oriented in the correct way, and I'm going to anchor it to the second bolt. So, for me, just up here, there's another bolt, so I'm going to put a quick draw on that. Okay, pull the rope tight so it's keeping that bottom beaner in place. And I'm just going to do a slip knot here. So all I do is I tuck that little loop there underneath that. Now that's pulling it tight against the bottom bolt, but it means that if I pull on that rope, it'll pop out. So if I fall, that knot will actually pop out. And I'll show you another use for those in a minute. So another thing you can do is, if you don't trust the single bolt there, and it's not a bad thing, you can actually clove hitch to the second one. So you keep the tension with a clove hitch, but it means you've got a clove hitch on here in case the bottom bolt fails. Okay, but for now I'm just going to use my slip knot to keep the tension so that that doesn't flop around down there. And I feed into my cache. Find the holes. Now, as I move, the rope should feed straight through my gree-gree, so it's taking from that cache loop. And so I just feed a little bit more through. Now at some point I'm going to come to a knot, which I have here, which as I said before, you just pop it out and the knot's gone.
This is exactly why I'm ditching the elasticized strap. On a traverse towards the side of the gree-gree, the rope is under a lot more friction to feed and the elastic strap just isn't strong enough to hold it in place.
And sometimes your rope can be twisted and get tangled. It's always something you want to watch out for when you lead soloing, so that you don't stop yourself moving halfway through a hard move. And try not to twist your rope when you put it into the bag. If it does get twisted, you can always sort it out when you do the first wrap. Okay, so one of the other problems that you get with lead soloing is what's called back feeding, where the rope sucks itself back through the gree-gree because of the weight behind it. And you see it doesn't take much and that rope falls down. And what happens is you end up with a lot more slack down there than what you really thought you had, what it feels like you had. So you need to keep the rope up. And there's a couple of ways I've tried. One is rubber bands, by putting a rubber band and wrapping it around the rope at a quick draw every 4 or 5. Another thing, I've used Velcro. I've tried all sorts of things. The best though is to just use the same sort of knot that I use to keep the tension on the rope at the bottom. And what I do, so that I don't end up with 4 or 5 knots that are all going to pop if I fall, I pull the rope through so that it pops the bottom knot before tying the next one. Okay, and if you tie it loosely enough, those knots will pop quite easily. So now that is keeping it all in place below, but also not letting us have a bunch of slack.
When I finish the pitch, I tie off the rope with a figure 8 knot and anchor it. Then I'm ready to repel the pitch. Notice how much slack there is in the top of the rope. You need to feed a lot of slack back into the system in order to make it easier to repel a traversing climb.
Matt, we need to build some sort of stabilizer for this fucking thing.
So on something that's such a traversing pitch, you want to make sure you clip on your way down. so that you are staying close to the clip. Otherwise you hang too far out. But in order to do that, before you wrap, make sure you feed quite a bit of slack back into the system. Otherwise you get too tight to actually pull yourself across. So you want to wrap down level with, or just below the quick draw, and then haul in all the slack on the lead side and pull yourself across and clip your line into instead of the previous lead line. Now something else I did up there as well, because I was going over an edge, I re-anchored. So in order to re-anchor, you simply clip on safety to the top of the quick draw. I then lower onto it. Okay, pull a fair bit of slack into here. Then I do a munter hitch. Clip it through. And then all I have to do is tie that munter hitch off. Now because I'm already backed up on this, I'm not too worried about it slipping. So all I do is just tuck that through and then put tension on it with my gree-gree. And that'll lock me off. So this end's slack. So if it's running over an edge, below the edge, you definitely want to re-anchor in some form. I do it with this particular slip type knot because it helps you get it undone. A clove hitch can be very hard to get undone once you've jugged on it. You could use a figure 8 if you want, they're pretty good. When it's vertical, you needn't bother putting the quick draws back through your rope. You just take them off and clean them. So what I'm using to second is I've just got the petzl croll set up exactly the same as I had the gree-gree, and as a backup I've just got a micro traction. It's good to have a backup, although I've never actually had the croll fail myself. You can see the knot pops very easily, even though I've been rappelling on it, and the same will go if you're jumaring back up, in which case you want to get above the knot before you pop it off.
When you've finished seconding the pitch, you simply pack your bag and start it all over again.